from the blackest corners of your mind, they call, pulling you deep into shadow, twisting your senses, keeping you from sleep. It's time to face your darkest fears. This is Tales to Terrify. Good evening, children of the night, and welcome. For those of you tuning in on release day, happy Friday the 13th. Unless, of course, you're a triskaidekaphobic, and then my condolences. Machetes and hockey masks aside, Friday the 13th has a long association with horrible things, namely, of course, bad luck. One of my favorite bits of trivia around Unlucky 13, though, comes courtesy of a man named Captain William Fowler, founder of an exclusive secret society in late 19th century New York called, cleverly, the 13 Club. Basically, a group of well-to-do movers and shakers who would gather with the express purpose of tempting fate and trying to dispel the stigma surrounding the number 13 and other unlucky superstitions. To get a full picture of the purpose of the 13 Club, it helps to understand a bit of where the stigma around the number 13 comes from. Mostly, it's thought anyway, that one of the key reasons 13 is considered so unlucky is that, in the Bible, that's the number of people who attended the Last Supper. As a result, for a long time, having 13 guests over for dinner was considered a terrible choice and an invitation to disaster. Naturally, Captain Fowler and his guests chose to spit in the superstitious eye of this tradition, hosting their 13 Club dinner parties on the 13th day of the month, starting at exactly 8:13 p.m. in room 13 of the Knickerbocker Cottage, a popular watering hole owned by Fowler himself. Before sitting down to a 13-course meal, the 13 dinner guests would have to walk under a ladder and a banner that read, Morituri te salutamus. In case your Latins may be a bit rusty, that means, those of us who are about to die salute you. The venue itself was laced with morbid details I'm sure would appeal to many of us, such as black-bordered invitations, skeleton imagery, and decorations. And heck, throw in some broken mirrors for good measure. Tempting fate seemed to work out okay, though, since apparently nothing notably horrible happened at any of the 13 Club's events. You know, it kinda makes me want to host a 13 Club dinner party myself. I hope your Friday the 13th is equally as fun, dark, and hopefully not unlucky, children of the night. Now, let's see if we can't add a bit of our own frightful flair to the occasion. We have one story for you this evening about a man who fears that the harder he fights his destiny, the more firmly it sets him on a terrible path to fulfill it. Our tale tonight comes to us from Jacob Stephen Mohr. Don't buy the hype. Jacob Stephen Mohr was not raised by wolves. Feral children are capable of many things, but weaving wild words into flesh and fantasy isn't one of them. Lucky for us. If it were, we'd all be speaking wolf. Mohr's work has previously appeared in Nightmare Sky, Summer Bludgeon, and Night Terrors Volume 20. He lives in Columbus, Ohio. Children of the night, join me for Jacob Stephen Mohr's Charly Singer's Knife Trick, a Tales to Terrify original.
1977. When he turned 7, Charlie Singer's right hand learned how to kill. He had a winter birthday, at the end of February, when the ground wasn't so crunchy and the sky ditched its gray clothes for blue. But Grover Harrell and Phoebe Yates from school also had February birthdays. So rather than compete in that cutthroat market, Charlie's parents celebrated their son's special day in March. Now spring bled in. All the trees put on tiny green crowns, and sometimes a dandelion shrugged up from a front lawn or sidewalk crack. The air wasn't quite warm, but carried a hopeful sweetness sometimes, the kind you could only smell under the age of 9. On the Singer's back porch, sitting around a Scooby-Doo cake with 7 candles in it, 10 little boys and girls turned up their noses without knowing why, thrilling in that new candy scent. Charlie Singer sat at the head of the table, watching his candles burn. There were paper plates scattered around, and plastic silverware in clear plastic. Charlie had unwrapped his and held the white fork in his lap, his right hand fiddling nervously while his friends all sang to him. 10, 7, and 8-year-olds singing happy birthday sounds like crows going after a hawk, and all those eyes made Charlie anxious in a sweaty kind of way. So halfway through the song, he'd stopped looking from face to face, and instead watched the fingertips of flame balancing on each candle wick. Every time cool, sweet wind breathed through the porch screens, the tiny orange teardrops seemed to writhe and vanish, then impossibly materialize again like a card trick. Charlie wasn't really thinking about anything. The wind blew, the fire danced, his friends sang tunelessly, occasionally breaking into high squeals of laughter at their own failure to hold the melody. Happy birthday, dear Charlie. The fork in his right hand twitched. It twisted. Across the birthday table, Charlie's mother had just picked up a knife. When Charlie was 4, Mrs. Singer carved a half moon out of her own little finger one evening, cooking a late dinner. Charlie didn't remember much about the day of the accident, but he remembered how the blood had looked. Not spurting, but soaking straight through the dish towel his mother clapped over the wound, a dull, spreading violet bloom showing between her fingers. But what stuck to him most was how her ghostly face had turned toward him just as he entered the kitchen, bloodless skin seeming to suck down close to her skull's contours. Her eyes were white circles, her paling lips curled inward, hugging clenched teeth. She stood bent just slightly over the cutting board, bleeding into the towel and staring mutely at her son, her breaths hissing oddly through her lips. Then she said, "Charlie, honey, fetch your father for me, please." Now, across the cake candles, Charlie saw that same silvery scar on that same delicate right hand, almost invisible against her skin. The knife she held wasn't the same knife. This had a serrated edge, for cutting cake, not flesh. But the scar seemed almost to squirm under the afternoon sun. It wriggled and vanished and reappeared on the tip of her finger, like the flames on the candles. Then suddenly it split wide open, letting blood, the same blood Charlie, dark and dull and spreading, ooze down her fingers and along the scalloping blade. But her face didn't change, didn't register the wound. She kept singing along with Charlie's friends, her bloodless lips frozen in the long O of "To You." Charlie's hand squeezed around the fork in his lap. Somehow it wasn't a fork anymore, but a knife now, a long butcher's knife like the one that butchered his mother, solid in his grip and still slick and dripping with her oozing raspberry-colored blood. A sharp snick of pain. He'd turned the fork around and drove it straight down into his own thigh. The tines hadn't penetrated far past his pants. In fact, he'd hardly broken the skin, but the unexpected jab pulled the color out of his face. His breaths came in short, silent hisses, long after the rows of faces at the table had stopped singing, and now all looked expectantly at him. Charlie's mother put down the knife. She didn't see the fork in her son's leg, but she came around to the front of the table and put a concerned hand on his shoulder. It was the scarred hand, the wounded hand. Now it was dripping jelly jam blood down his polo shirt and into his lap. "Something wrong?" she murmured. Charlie stood up suddenly. The fork tumbled to the ground, below the table and forgotten. "I got to pee," he announced. He pushed back from the table and limped into the house. A bathroom found him, and he locked himself in it. He kept the lights off. In the dark, the blood disappeared. The pain in his leg was fading too, but his right-hand fingers kept curling around a knife handle that wasn't there, like it would strike out again without his permission. Like it had liked it, that little taste of pain, like it wanted another. Outside, on the porch, 7 birthday candles just kept burning. 1982. It wasn't like they didn't have anything better to do that summer. Some of them were 12, some had just hit 13. But for all of them, summertime was still an endless shimmering oasis. Bike trials, ball diamonds, gas station sodas, and trips to Cold Corners Lake when the county posted a lifeguard. But when Chrissy Frome said they should all sneak into the matinee of Blood In, that's what they did. Because they'd always gone along with whatever Chrissy wanted, so long as any of them could remember. So they lined up at the ticket counter and paid for another screening of E.T. the Extraterrestrial, then crept across the purple-carpeted theater hall just after the horror show started. They were always 5, no more and no fewer. Ben Craig, Ruth McKay, Teddy Whitmer, Chrissy Frome, and Charlie Singer. They scurried up to a row of open seats in the back, navigating by flickering projector light. Charlie brought up the caboose, his stomach in square knots. He'd heard from somebody's older brother that, true to its name, Blood In spilled 7,000 gallons of fake red stuff in 90 minutes, that it was actually secretly rated X instead of R for nudity and sheer creepo grossness. Charlie liked fake blood and creepo grossness, or so he told his friends, and the chance to see breasts that weren't in a magazine wasn't anything to scoff at. But he'd also heard that the killer in the flick tears off a college girl's face and eats it right on screen, and he wasn't looking forward to seeing that blown up 35 feet high in shocktastic 3D. But he followed the dark shape of Chrissy's back and shoulders up to row J just as the credits ended. "Aw, shit," Teddy whined. "My 3D glasses popped a lens." "Cool it." Chrissy's glare flashed like fish scales. "You want to get kicked out?" "Who, me?" Teddy waggled his Cyclops glasses at her. "You think you pass for 18? "I look more 18 than you," she fired back, a drop of real venom in her voice. "No tits," Teddy whispered. "Shrimp dick," Chrissy whispered back. "Shh," Ben Craig said, leaning across the row. "Shh," joined Ruth McKay through a buttery mouth of popcorn. Charlie Singer did not shush Chrissy Frome. He watched the flickering screen. There, standing bigger than outdoors, a hulking shape darkened a kitchen door. He wasn't shaped like anything at first. He was a suggestion, a smear of menace conjured from night fog and film grain. But then the babysitter screamed, one long operatic note, and the monstrous thing took one thudding step into a milk-bright shaft of moonglow. He had dungarees on. That's what Charlie noticed first. The knees were dirt-caked, the cuffs were rolled up twice at the ankle, and a bloody handprint gleamed on one muscular thigh. But they were dungarees all the same, like somebody's kid brother should wear. Under this was a working man's plaid button-down, also rolled up to show hairy forearms. The crooked tooth of some deadly instrument, a saw blade, a crowbar, a rust-glazed hatchet, dangled from one rock-like fist, but Charlie's gaze rose upward to the pillowcase tied around the killer's head. The fabric had been white once, dozens of dead babysitters and hundreds of gallons of corn syrup ago, but it didn't cover the shape's whole face. A tear in the linen, a chin and mouth showed through, with split lips and black gums and teeth no dentist could fix. But with the eyes covered, he wasn't a man. He was a sightless horror, a dark dweller, Something dragged up from the cosmic below to terrorize half-naked co-eds everywhere. It lurched forward blindly, almost comically stiff, and the babysitter let out another ear-buster scream. And just beside him, Charly felt Chrissy Frome bend forward in her seat, teeth bared in an eager, covetous grin. It hadn't happened in 5 years, but just out of sight, the fingers on his right hand curled inward with a jerk, around the handle of something that wasn't there. On the screen, through day-for-night darkness, the killer lunged. Stab went the rusty saw blade, and stab went Charlie Singer's knife hand in similar darkness. Chok, chok, chok. Noises of tearing flesh, of punctured meat. The killer's wet, black grin filled the 30-foot screen, his breath fogging the lens. And Charlie felt, shouldn't be, couldn't be, never was, somebody's hot, sweet blood running down his wrist, already drying between his clenched fingers, becoming his, becoming real. The babysitter's scream died into a soggy gurgle, replaced by the screams of his friends beside him. Chrissy Frome's were the loudest of all, gleeful and glorying in her terror, rising above the rest as though on wings. Stab, stab, stab. A thin stream of ruby blood, an unfocused close-up of a rolled-back eye. The theater screamed with one pair of lungs, all except Charlie Singer. Then, somehow, it was over. Time had leapfrogged him, and the theater lights were coming on, leaving the room full of slitted, blinking eyes. Charlie blinked too, head spinning. His friends began climbing to their feet, flashing relieved grins at each other. "Did you see?" they kept asking. "Did you see? Did you see?" Chrissy Frome knelt on the sticky popcorn floor, double-knotting her shoe. But Charlie didn't stand yet, even though his legs ached from all that sitting. The black screen was still scrolling production credits. Cold tightness squirmed under his skin as he read, Sackhead Charlie, Mick Cubby, Chrissy Frome, Pauline Dix. Sweat popped along his hairline. He tore his eyes away just in time to see Chrissy, the real Chrissy Frome, clean all over, without a speck of red dye or spirit gum scars, turn her face towards his. She was smiling under her 3D glasses, that same glorying grin as before, too eager and too wanting. Her hand jerked up towards his face. He flinched back, feeling the knife's weight in his right hand, concealed behind his back. But all she did was block his face with her outstretched palm. It shielded her face as well, but he knew by some deadly instinct what she was doing. He imagined it from her viewpoint, his chin and mouth the only things showing beneath the mask of her hand. "Go like this," she commanded, curling her lips back. Charlie did as she asked. He grimaced, feeling sick to his stomach. The room was emptying out. Their friends had filed out into the hall, and the ushers were storming the lower rows of seats with push brooms and trash bags. Charlie's stomach twisted inside him, but he kept baring his teeth, imagining gums black as rot, oozing from the corners. He imagined Chrissy's screaming again, her face contorting in horror and disgust. His own face splattered red, breath fogging the camera. Stab, stab, stab. "You gonna get me, Charlie?" Chrissy teased. Charlie shrugged miserably. Between every tooth, his mouth tasted just like iron. 1988. He hadn't meant to get big like that. 18 years old, 6'2", 220 pounds. It wasn't really that huge, not in a Ripley's Believe It or Not way, but it had crept up on him. Almost overnight, it seemed to Charlie. Like he'd gone to bed his same scrawny self and woke up in somebody else's body, big enough to wear like a suit of armor. Now in the mirror he saw some other boy, or not a boy at all. He saw something prehistoric, something mammoth and blundering that waded through thigh-deep mud or crashed through ancient underbrush. He hated how his legs didn't fit under school desks and had to splay akimbo so his knees blocked the aisles. He hated how doorways got dark when he lingered in them. and he really hated looking down at the tops of people's heads, seeing their faces turn up to meet his gaze, that irrepressible startle in their eyes. In some other life, they'd have given him a nickname that matched his frame. Fridge, or Truck, or Tanker. Buster, Bruiser, Dozer. He could have liked that. But 6 years had gifted the world 7 blood-in sequels, plus one terrible video game for the Genesis. So Sackhead Charlie was everywhere. He was posters, he was lunchboxes, he was t-shirts and ball caps and stickers on 3-ring binders. So nobody called Charlie Singer champ, or big guy, or too tall. Everybody, even his teachers, called him killer. Charlie wished he'd taken up smoking. Now he was down in the Coliseum with the other gladiators. That's where they sent big boys like him who didn't have any other sociable interests. Blood sport, in sharpened cleats and game pants and bulky shoulder pads, and a helmet already smudged brown and green from the rain-slick field. Charlie knuckled the white line painted in the grass alongside 4 other boys nearly as large as him. Every muscle tensed, shivering against the pissing rain. The crowd was a wall of noise, the constant crash of a single far-off wave. Across the line from him, another brute wearing the enemy's colors glowered, bearing his mouthguard in a territorial display. "You're dead, 32. Charlie laughed grimly. He was big, this other boy, but he wasn't a killer. In the cold, wet grass, Charlie's right hand flexed bone white. The call of "Hike!" An explosion of movement along the scrimmage line. Charlie exploded too, meeting his man head-on. Their dance was fast and vicious. Gloved hands scrambled for wrestling holds on forearms and shoulders. Helmets knocked together once, twice. Charlie saw the other boy's eyes rattle in their holes, his mouth hanging open, spit whitening at the corners of his lips. Hate flashed in those dull eyes, but it had no gas behind it, blunted by battle fatigue. Charlie dropped his hips. The other lineman stumbled forward. Charlie pushed off with his legs, lifting his man up, sending him crashing sideways, already looking for his real prey. He found him, the quarterback, slinking deeper into his collapsing pocket. His helmet snapped left and right, looking for an open man and seeing none, looking for some safe passage, some easy escape as the trap began to close around him. What he got was Charlie coming down on him like a brick wall mid-collapse. All sacks were the same to Charlie, but he'd remember this one. The wet smack of the quarterback's helmet cratering the sod, the whoosh of his lungs as he crushed under Charlie's weight, the muffled grunt of pain as something bruised, something snapped, something tore in the clumsy, pawing ballet of the tackle, the wide glare of fear when his quarry realized escape wasn't happening, that his killer had him in his jaws. Charlie pulled free of the dog pile. He slapped his gloves together, washing his hands like Pilate. Something clung between his first 2 fingers. A glob of dark blood the size of a lost tooth. No, it was a tooth, like a snowball with a rock in it. Charlie's tongue searched around in his mouth, but found no gaps. He looked for the quarterback lying on the sod. Field medics, standing ready like vultures, were already stretchering him away. One leg was twisted at an awful angle, the knee swelling through his uniform pants, and his hands were clasped over the bloody ruin of his mouth. Charlie looked down at the tooth. Without thinking, he jammed his fingers in his mouth, sucking it clean, then licked his lips and threw the tooth away, wiping his hand on his jersey. Then his gaze jerked up into the stands. Because of the rain, the bleachers were only half full, bedraggled clumps of parents and siblings mostly, with umbrellas and shiny slickers. But nearer to the guardrail, between the seats and the field, one figure in a white raincoat sat alone, pulling back her hood to shake out soggy curls. A cold, flushed face turned toward him. Chrissy Frome, wearing the other team's practice jersey under the jacket. Her eyebrows shot up, and she cupped her hands beside her mouth, yelling something which was swept away by the roar of the crowd. He didn't catch any of it. It didn't matter if he'd heard it or not. His stomach bubbled and lurched. His right hand flexed in its glove. For a knife, a weapon, anything with a blade that could kill. "Way to go, 32! Somebody else hollered, just out of his view. Charlie Singer turned away, toward the middle of the field. He pulled his helmet off, bent at the waist, and vomited on the 50-yard line. 1991. He didn't see Chrissy Frome again for 3 years. Or that's how he pretended it happened. Really, it was like walking around with his eyes closed. There were 4 more home games in Charlie's senior season, and she showed up at them all, sitting on that same bleacher near the divider, that same white raincoat draped over her shoulders or tied around her waist, watching him, a statue in a sea of cheering, undulating bodies. But after that first game, she didn't call out to him again. She didn't even wave. And Charlie didn't see her. Being so big, he was used to looking down. He watched his man across the line. He watched the quarterback cowering in the pocket. He kept his head down. He didn't taste her blood, in the air, on his fingers, on his tongue. The off-season was easier, safer, locked in cinder-block hallways 8 hours a day. He left his car, a '77 VW Beetle, painted burgundy, a gift from his parents for clinching his athletic scholarship to Armistice College, in the driveway, and took the bus every afternoon, textbooks in his lap, reading with his head ducked against the seat in front of him. By degrees, he made himself smaller. He learned stealth, and soon total invisibility. He learned to make shadows hide him, to become unreal, unremarkable, to vanish. Chrissy Frome took the opposite lesson. Every time she reappeared, she was more beautiful, more obvious. Once in a drugstore, spotted in the convex security mirror, only the side of her face and a mane of bouncing curls on her shoulders as she disappeared down another aisle of high white shelves. Then in the local park, reading on a wood bench with her head ducked over a weather-battered paperback something. Charlie only spotted her when he'd nearly jogged right past. She didn't look up, but he felt her stare anyhow, right between his massive shoulders, long after he'd sprinted away. The last time it happened, he was right outside his own house. The wheels on the trash bins always sounded like distant thunder, but that morning, as Charlie rolled them down his parents' driveway, they seemed to make no noise at all. The sky was close overhead, white clouds hanging low in the orange firmament. Summer heat squeezed the world. Charlie hunched his shoulders. The bins weighed nearly nothing in his paw-like hands. He reached the curb and looked down his street. The trash truck was still 6 houses away, and it wasn't moving. 2 garbage men stood beside it. They weren't moving either. They had paused half through lifting one plastic bin between them, their knees bent, their arms locked out straight and straining against the weight of the load. Sudden footsteps to his left, quick and light, flip-flops on the sidewalk. Charlie turned, maddeningly slow, through honey-thick air. Tiny fingers wrapped around his throat. She was so small compared to him, dwarfed even by his shadow. But somehow she reached up and locked her hands around his neck, pulling him down with impossible strength. Charlie's head spun. The sky lurched closer, crushingly low. It forced him to his knees, to Chrissy's height. He put one huge hand on her face to shove her away. She mirrored him, taking one hand off his throat to scratch at his eyes, covering his face so only his mouth and chin showed beneath. Suddenly, it was his hands around her skinny neck, and not the other way around, squeezing hard, so tight they almost seemed to meet in the middle. But Chrissy Frome wouldn't take her hand away, even as her face turned red, then purple, then almost black. "You gonna get me too, Charlie Singer?" she groaned, eyes rolling over dead white. When Charlie woke, he still couldn't breathe. It was his own hand, the right hand, tightening around his own throat like jaws. Then it wasn't that summer, but another, early May instead of August. It was the kind of summer night that was almost a second kind of daytime, with a moon so clear you could fill a glass with its light. Charly limped down the Armistice College Center walk alone. Every movement was stiff. His limbs jerked forward in stop-motion frenzies, hauling the weight of the cast on his left leg. The cast meant the untimely death of his football scholarship. His grades meant there wasn't money coming from anywhere else. Charly reasoned it wasn't his fault. Pencils kept snapping in his hand during tests and lectures. But even that wasn't the root of it all. Something inside him had slowed, calcified. His skull felt full of dead leaves, muffling his thoughts. He didn't know why he was walking at night. That was happening to him more and more. He passed a lamppost fluttering with flyers. Faces stared out of a few of them, missing students from the past year, and now the year before that as well. Some of them he'd known by name. A couple he might even have called friends. Others he'd only met the once. He wouldn't be coming back here next year. A pair of shadows stumbled off the stoop of an academic building. A freshman couple, arms interlinked, moving like one gangling mass of drunken limbs down the sidewalk away from him, their laughter like dogs barking in the distance. One sideways step brought him into the shadows off the path. The cool dark welcomed him. From its embrace, he watched the young couple stagger off, smaller and smaller, but still in reach, never quite lost in the night. At his side, a flinch, a sinewy twitch. "Since when do you go here?" He didn't flinch at her voice. This wasn't the dream. And she didn't appear out of thin air or melt into view from the dark. She pushed the building doors open and trotted down the concrete stairs to meet him, teasing an itch above her left eyebrow. She was dressed up for something, some business school function. A fitted woman's blazer, navy, not black, and a skirt to match, tight across her thighs. It made her look older than she was. He tried to picture the Chrissy Frome who'd sat beside him at the movies, who'd watched him on the football field in a downpour, but nothing appeared on the screen. If that girl still existed, she was buried somewhere deep. Even her curls were gone, flat-ironed into long auburn sheets. "Well, don't be rude," she said. "Walk me to my dorm." As her slender arm wove around his own, she grinned up at him and almost danced in place. Or maybe she was only wobbling on her high heels. "Haven't you heard?" she gushed. "Somebody's killing co-eds." He didn't know where her dorm was. It didn't seem to matter. They started walking, back the way Charly had come from, toward the center of campus. The moon painted everything in blacks and whites. Chrissy talked and talked. She never seemed to run out of it, supplying both halves of the conversation. Under that, their footfalls echoed off the bricks. The clack-click of her heels, the thump-drag-thump of his cast. Charly wondered where she was leading them. That didn't seem to matter either. "I don't go here anymore." The sound of his own voice surprised him. It came out like something stuck in a pipe, like he hadn't spoken in years. Chrissy jerked on his arm, and they stopped under another lamp. "What do you mean you don't go here anymore?" He showed her his cast. "I was on scholarship. Now I'm not." "Oh, you poor thing." He couldn't tell if she was making fun or not. "What'll you do?" Charly shrugged. "Go home, I guess." She tapped his cast with a toe. "I was gonna ask what happened." "You should see the other guy." "He as big as you?" "Bigger," Charly said. That got a laugh, but it sounded high and nervous. She hadn't let go of his arm. Only then did he notice she was shivering. She wasn't wobbling on her heels at all. Her whole body was shaking in spite of the warm summer night. "Are you all right?" She shivered again, but nodded. They kept walking. Somehow they got off center, winding off through the main thoroughfare and onto one of the back street sidewalks that crisscrossed the outskirts of the campus. Willow boughs drooped around them, and the musk of dangling wisteria filled Charly's nose. It was darker here, with the foliage blocking the moon, true night now. In the distance, the clock tower bellowed its tolling call. Charly lost count of the hours. Maybe 9, maybe 11. Chrissy said, "There's another Blood In movie coming out. Think you'll go see it?" Charly shrugged. "If it's good, I guess." It was a lie. He'd seen them all, but this didn't matter either. The sidewalk became a raised wooden walkway, threading through a boggy section of the southernmost part of campus. Charlie's heavy footsteps thudded the creaking boards, drowning out Chrissy's heels. He stopped and leaned against the rotting rail. It almost bent and crumbled under his weight, so he stood straight again. Chrissy stopped too, looking around at the wisteria and Spanish moss, falling like women's hair off the trees. "Why'd we stop here?" she asked. Charly didn't know, so he asked, "Why were you waiting for me tonight?" He couldn't see her face, but he imagined her going red with indignation. "I don't like this. I'm going back to my dorm." "All right," said Charly. Neither of them moved. "I'm going," Chrissy Frome repeated. Then she cupped her forehead in her hand and laughed. "This is stupid," she said, "isn't it?" She had stepped away from him. Now she crossed the wooden platform again, backing him against the rotted-through railing. She didn't press against him, but he could feel her warmth butting into him like a cat beneath an open hand. "I'm not coming back here next year either," she said. He blinked at her. The night had closed in, crept nearer. Why not? One hand rose up mechanically, touching the ribs on her opposite side. Her face flickered, flinching in pain. Then the look was gone. Her old mocking expression returned, that same old too eager, too wanting grin. For a moment she was the child Chrissy again, and he was the skinny 12-year-old who hadn't gotten too small for his body yet. But that look was a fake. He could see it now. He could smell the fear behind it, and the horror. "It doesn't really matter why," Chrissy said. "I'm not coming back." He reached for her. The movement was overquick, clumsy, and grasping, but Chrissy fell against him anyway, trembling, almost disappearing in his grip. It wasn't really a kiss. She stood on her toes, putting her face just beneath his, her mouth only an inch or so from his own, her breath shuddering in her chest. But there was no contact. He didn't lean down, and she didn't press up, each waiting for some signal, some other feeling, some secondary moment of climax. One cool hand touched his cheek. The other covered his face, only showing his mouth beneath. "I'm ready," she breathed. Charly pushed her away, but his hands stayed on her shoulders, viciously close to her pale, exposed neck. "I don't want to hurt you." She smiled, but there wasn't any joy in it. No joy and no mockery. She lifted up the side of her jacket, untucking her shirt so she showed her ribs. One whole side of her bloomed black and purple. Some of the bruises were fresh, and some weren't. It looked like hell. She let her jacket fall down again, but didn't bother with tucking the shirt back in. "It's all right. I learned how to get hurt already." Just out of view, quivering fingers played along his waistband. "Come on. I'm ready," she said. "And I think you're ready too." Charly's breath boiled. His right hand trembled, closing on the knife at last. He pulled Chrissy Frome toward him, and prayed she was wrong.
That was Jacob Stephen Mohr's Charly Singer's Knife Trick, as read by Colin Duncan. Colin Duncan is a well-spoken man of strangely indeterminate age. He often uses archaic words and speaks of centuries past as if he had personally witnessed them. But that would be impossible. These days he lives in the Pacific Northwest, where he sells sustainable clothing by day and teaches martial arts by night. Thank you, Colin. Well, children of the night, the hour is late, and we've run out of tales to tell. For now. Tales to Terrify is made possible by the tremendous generosity of our supporters on Patreon and PayPal. Incredible fans like Lestle Baxter, Amanda Carrillo, Amanda Gottfried, and Orion D. Hegre, whose generous support keeps these lights on and flickering ominously. If you're not a supporter, head over to patreon.com/Tales to Terrify. You'll find all kinds of perks, like ad-free episodes, bonus content, and one-of-a-kind collectibles. Every dollar goes back into this show, and we appreciate your support so much. Want another way to support the show that doesn't cost you a cent? Head over to Podchaser, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts and drop us a 5-star review. You'll not only put an unnaturally wide smile on our faces, but help new listeners discover our terrifying tales too. You can show your love of the show out in the world with some Tales to Terrify merch. TalesToTerrify.com/merch will take you to our TeePublic store, where we've got a great collection of creepy custom and curated designs. Tales to Terrify is produced by Seth Williams, Meredith Morgenstern, Andrew Gibson, Crystal Hammond, Spencer Disparty, and myself, Drew Sebastini, with original theme by Nebulous Entertainment. Tales to Terrify is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Join us again next week as we become the nightmares we fear most with more Tales to Terrify.